if you are a private practice owner and you think that your average reimbursement per visit is somewhere around 110 or 115 bucks, and you're basing that based on the last couple EOBs that you looked at, this video is gonna be for you. There's many private practice owners, many clinicians right now making really big decisions around how much rent you can afford, what your salaries can be, promotions, etc. And you're basing that on a number that might not actually be real, okay? Because when you actually do the math over a full quarter, over a full 90 days, your average reimbursement per visit is usually a lot lower than you might think. Okay, and so today what I'm going to show you is how to actually calculate your real average revenue per visit and why guessing based on a couple EOBs could be very, very dangerous, and some specific levers that you can pull around staffing and people systems that can help you grow that number to a healthy margin without keeping you glued to the treatment floor. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode number 10 of the Private Practice Scorecard. I'm your host, Dr. Adam Robin. Happy to be here and looking forward to serving you today. All right. Today is kind of a bittersweet day. Number one, I get to be here and do this. Number two, it's the second time I've done it because sometimes the technology just doesn't work. So I recorded the entire video last time and it didn't record all the way. So here we are doing it again. All right. But the good news is I have all of my notes. So I'll be able to kind of skim through them very quickly and we won't have to start from scratch. Okay. But today I want to talk about one of the most important numbers in your practice, which is your average revenue per visit. All right. Everybody kind of knows what it is. This is going to kind of be a summary or a recap of what we've been talking about over the last several weeks, but it's a critical number and one that if you don't know it really, really well, if you're not hyper obsessed over it, then you're going to be making a lot of the bad decisions because your productivity expectations, your salaries, your raises, the way you promote, the way that you schedule, all of that stuff is based on your average reimbursement per visit. It has to be, And so we want to make sure that it's accurate. We want to make sure that you're making good decisions because your decisions impact your people. And if you want to impact your people well, I made the mistake. If you don't want to make a mistake in doing something, making a decision around something that might not fully be true, that impacts your people negatively, you got to know your numbers. All right. And so let's talk about some of the common problems that you might see with your average reimbursement per visit. Okay. When I talk to owners, some of the errors or mishaps that I see are, number one, if you just flat out don't know what your average reimbursement per visit is, right? You just don't know what it is. I talk to owners all the time, no fault, like no like judgment, but sometimes they're like, oh, I'd have to go back and double check, or I'd have to go look at that, which I get it. Like you're slammed with patients all day. Like you barely have time to breathe. You're just working really hard and not, it's a lot of cognitive load to go back and crunch numbers after you've seen 15 patients for the day. But unfortunately we have to find time to do it, and too much time in that zone of hard work and not looking at your numbers can get you in trouble really quick. You can end up building a practice that doesn't work mathematically, and that could be a problem for you. Okay. The second mistake that I make is one that I've kind of already alluded to, which is you may be making an assumption around what your average reimbursement per visit is based off of a couple EOBs that you put your eyes on, right? You're kind of scanning through a couple EOBs and you're making assumptions that, oh yeah, it's about 110 bucks a visit or 115 bucks a visit because that's what Blue Cross paid me last month on this one visit or this handful of visits. All right. That's the second big mistake that you can make. It's the one that we've all made, including me. And the third one is assuming that there's not a whole lot you can do about it. Man, that's such a bad. I have a good friend of mine. His name's Spencer Shoemaker, very powerful leader. He's a partner of mine in a couple businesses, but one of his biggest pet peeves is hearing, this is the way we've always done it, or this is kind of always done it. And it's like, man, that is where all of your business dreams go to die. If we can create the courage and the willingness to lean into the different, like, hey, the only thing that is consistent is that you're going to have to change, especially with today's economic climate. Like, reimbursements are declining, economic pressures are going up. So like we have to find ways to be more efficient with our practice. And so this is how we always do it, or there's nothing that we can do about it, is like a really bad place to be. I would challenge you to face it and confront it and say, you know what, we are going to do something different about it, because a lot of innovation can come from that mindset. Okay. But if you do fall into that trap, and you will have seasons of it, hopefully you don't stay there too long, the consequence of that is that you will be making really critical decisions in your business, such as pay rates, productivity, the admin hires, the rent that you can afford, or you pay which contracts you decide to keep and go and network with. All of those decisions will be made off of really bad assumptions and wind up costing you a lot more than just money in the long run. All right. Because when reality, the real life, when that doesn't match the story that you're telling yourself, like, oh yeah, it's about $115 a visit. When those things don't match, the only way that you can compensate and bridge that gap is by working harder and not smarter. And that is like the epitome of private practice doom that we want to try to get out of. Okay. You end up working more hours, deploying more emotional energy into your people, into your practice, depleting yourself, and quite frankly, just don't get the financial return that you need, that you deserve, and ultimately burning out and resenting your business. And so we want to try to avoid that at all costs. Okay. So the first thing that we want to do is measure it accurately. Okay, how do we measure your average reimbursement per visit accurately? So at this point, if you're still here, what you don't want to do is take a couple EOBs and call it good. That's a bad strategy. All right. Instead, what we want to do is use a trailing 90-day window of time. Okay. So like right now it's July 20th. You can use Q1, or you can use some months prior to today, a 90-day window of time. Okay. Start with that, because 90 days is usually enough for things to typically normalize and to level out. Your patient demographics aren't going to change much. There might be some subtleties, right? Some there's going to be those fringe cases, but the median's going to be, it's going to have a nice bell curve of normal distribution in your practice. And 90 days, typically it's like the farther you zoom out and the more it's almost like the less precise you can be, it's actually more accurate over the long run, which is typically the truth, right? We don't want to be accurate just for today. We want to be accurate over the whole year or the whole decade, right? So zoom out over 90 days. Okay. And so what you want to look at is, let's see if I can look at something here. What you want to look at is your average reimbursement per visit. Told you guys I had some notes. You're going to use a trailing 90 to 180 day window. All right. Typically 90 is pretty good. All right. Step one is you want to calculate the total collected revenue and when I say collected revenue, I mean money that actually hit your bank account. You want to look at how much money came into your bank account. That's going to be over-the-counter collections, insurance payments, cash pay, anything that came in. All right. Over that 90-day period. All right. So you don't need to look at your EMR for that. You just need to look at your bank statement. Right. Step two is you're going to look at how many total visits did you complete within that 90-day window? All right. Now, this is going to be, like I said, a little bit back of the napkin. And then step 3 is going to be, you're just simply going to divide. Your average revenue per visit is going to be your total collected dollars divided by your total number of visits that you completed in that 90-day window. So example, if you collected $100,000 in that 90 days, you saw 1,000 visits, you are averaging $100 per visit. All right. So that is a formula. It's not a very complicated one. You guys are smart. You guys are freaking healthcare professionals. You know what you're doing. It's not, this stuff is simple, right? And you're going to say, Adam, well, that's not precise because those dollars aren't collected for those visits. I know, I get it, I know. But when you zoom out over the long run and you do it quarter by quarter by quarter and you create a consistent measurement rhythm in that regard, you'll see that you are pretty close, and you're a lot more close than reality than managing every single EOB. And so I'm not suggesting this is the only way you can do it. I'm suggesting that this is the most reliable way that I found for the ROI, right? Return on your time. Okay. And so the question is, why does this matter? Why is this a better way of doing it compared to just handpicking a few EOBs? And the reasons are very simple. Number one, like I said, your payer mix is going to be relatively stable. The types of patients you treat, the demographics of the insurance contracts that come through your door over that 90-day period are going to be stable. The way that you bill and code your patients is probably going to be relatively stable. Okay. So if you have the same team, typically you're going to have the same type of, you're going to schedule on the hour most of the time or on the 30-minute block or whatever it is in your practice. It's going to be relatively consistent. Your denial rates are going to be relatively stable. When I say stable, I don't necessarily mean good. I just mean they're going to be consistent. They're not going to do like this all through that 90 days. They're going to be relatively stable. Okay. Your over-the-counter collections and your contract mixed, all of that stuff is going to be baked into the 90-day period. So you're going to get a number that measures the overall performance of your entire revenue cycle and not just one EOB. So it's going to look at the efficiency of your over-the-counter collections, the way you're billing and coding, the way your billing department is performing, your denial rates, what cash pay services, all of that's going to be baked in. Okay. And it's going to reflect what actually hits your bank account, right? Not just what a specific code could have paid you in a perfect world. Right. So we tend to, when we estimate based off of a random EOB, we tend to hyperinflate and be just a hair optimistic with our revenue per visit. And that gets us in trouble. It's gotten me in trouble. Right. So it's not important. Like, I think it's a bad idea to be controlling in your practice or in your business, but this is one thing that you probably want to have some deep levels of control over, so that you can be responsible, so that you can make really smart decisions, which is ultimately going to be the thing that serves everyone in the company. Okay. And so, like I mentioned, why does the EOB guess thing not work? It's going to ignore denial rates. Maybe you happen to pick one claim that got paid on time accurately. Well, it doesn't, you're not looking at all those auths that got denied, all the things that didn't get paid, right? 10 to 20% of claims got kicked back or never got paid. It's going to ignore things like who's actually doing the billing, right? It's going to also ignore things like the time of year. It's going to be less subject to the time of year. Like maybe there's, earlier in the beginning of the year, you're going to have a lot of patients who have out-of-pocket expenses. They're going to have deductibles and co-insurances and things like that are going to eat them. More of that revenue per visit is shifted to the patient responsibility. As I mentioned, we also tend to round up with a little bit of optimism. So it's going to be a good filter for that, right? Numbers don't lie, right? So it's going to be a filter for that. And ultimately, it's going to create a little bit of pain, right? I'm even going to watch this. It's going to create a little bit of pain, sadness. Well, they say though, what is it? You won't change into the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same, right? And so if you continue to look at your bank account and you see flat or zero, no profits, eventually that's going to become really very painful. But when you look at this reality, you actually put in your numbers into your dashboard, into your pro forma, it's going to create some real pain. And you're going to be like, oh my gosh, look at this thing I've created unintentionally. And I'm in a little bit of a pickle. It's going to create that, and which is going to be hard. But that is the thing that you can start actually, it's going to be the first dose of reality that's really going to be a great starting point for you to create change in your organization, which is really important for you to experience. So you can't hide and bury your head under another 50 patients a week. You have to actually confront this, which is also going to be the thing that you learn from. Okay. All right. So that's my spiel on average revenue per visit. Hopefully that's of value. That's going to talk about why this is important, why this matters, how to analyze it, how to collect, how to measure it. All right. So what I want to do is briefly highlight the financial touch points or the financial levers that you have that you can deploy to create change here. All right. And I actually recommend you do them in this order. Okay. Most people try to skip to the end or skip to the flashy thing, and they ignore the foundation, which is, we all know why that's important. Build a house on a foundation. If not, it's going to topple over, right? You don't want to create more complexity in the business. No more than you have to. Start with the foundation. Get really good at the basics. And you're probably going to be really well off that way, okay? So let's talk about them. And guess what? I have all the notes. Okay? So what actually drives your average revenue per visit? Well, there's 6 drivers. There's probably a few more, but these are the big 6. We'll call it the big 6. Okay? The big 6. Driver number 1 is going to be your over-the-counter collections. Okay? So that's going to be your front desk people systems, making sure you have a really strong front desk person who's, you need to have a people-oriented person who's driven by metrics and has a professional sense of urgency around keeping your over-the-counter collections dialed in, right? There's a very specific avatar. You have to be good at, there's some emotional intelligence. You have to have a little bit of sales. You have to have a little bit of pleasant persistence to create that transaction at the front desk consistently. And also somebody who wants to see metrics go up, right? They get a little energized by playing the game. All right. But essentially you're looking at, you want to ask yourself how much of that patient responsibility you're actually collecting at the time of service. And we want the answer to that question to be 100%, right? Every day we want to see 100% of dollars that were projected to be collected for that day. If you saw 10 visits and they each owed you $10, you need to have $100 in the cash drawer at the end of the day. And we need that reported up and analyzed and have tight control over your financial systems. Unfortunately, you have to. I'm not saying it's convenient, because we'd rather just be focusing on patient care and pouring into those people and giving them what they need, but we got to have a little bit of money in the bank to be able to do that. So I'm not going to say it's good or bad. I'm just going to say it is, right? Healthcare is tough in America, but this can help you. If you can button these systems up, it can help you balance. It can help you create the safety net that you need to actually show up for the patients the way that you want, which is the ultimate goal, right? All right. So, as an example, if your over-the-counter collections are sitting at around 70%, that's a big difference. It's a big difference, right? So you can see in this example here, over here on the right, let's say you collected $50,000 for the month. Well, let's say your average monthly recurring revenue is around $50,000. And let's say, that we know that somewhere around 20% of your revenue is over-the-counter transactions with your patients. Okay, so that would mean $10,000 of that 50,000. Hopefully that's right. Would be over-the-counter collections. Some type of combination between cash, co-insurance, deductibles, things that are transacted over the counter. All right. If you only collect 70% of that, you're looking at only collecting $7,000 a month, which is a deficit of $3,000. Okay. That's $3,000 of pure profit, or that could be $3,000 in bonus compensation for your clinicians, or money that you can spend on marketing, or money that you can spend on recruiting, or creating competitive compensation, or adding new programs. There's a lot of things you can do with that money, right? And all you got to do is clean up your over-the-counter collections. It's the first financial touch point in the business, all right? And the way that we drive that metric, that over-the-counter collections, is to have, these 4 things. Number 1, very strong intake process. So if you want to go back a few episodes, I did a full episode breakdown on how to maximize, or it's how to get everything that you're owed over the counter to make sure you're not letting any penny slip through the cracks. But you want to have a very strong intake process, documented intake process that's built around sales and managing that patient expectation for that transaction. Okay. You want to have very clear financial agreements in place that are signed and documented during that intake process with that patient. You want to have a strong agreement. Agreement means it's co-created, right? It's not something that's assigned to the patient. It's like, hey, we verified the insurance. We just want you to be clear. This is what is owed. Do you feel good about this? Does this feel like, do we feel an even exchange? Do we have an understanding here? Sign, have it on file. Make sure you're really thoroughly explaining that and managing that expectation up front. Okay, number 3, having a credit card on file and having auto pay options for your patients, right? So what that means is, in order to receive care here, you have to put a credit card on file, and so unless you show up with cash or some type of payment at the time of service, you'll be just charged at the time of service for your credit card, and any payments that are outstanding at the end of the month will be automatically charged. All right, create that agreement, create that all in writing for your patients, so everything is kosher there, right? Many businesses, this is standard of practice, right? This is standard practice. There's many businesses, healthcare businesses, and even like things like gym memberships or Amazon, they have a credit card on file, right? You got to pay for what you have to have your patients put a credit card on file, in my opinion. Okay. And then lastly, you want to have somebody that is assigned ownership of reporting that metric to you daily. What is your over-the-counter collection percentage every day, right? So ideally, either depending on the size of your practice, right? Depending on the size of your practice is going to depend on what that should look like. But over-the-counter collections is a primary revenue driver at the front desk. And what ends up happening usually is we try to squeeze 10 roles into one. And so your front desk is doing the intake, the authorizations, the verifications. Maybe they're doing a little billing. They're helping you with marketing. They're doing the scheduling. They're doing a lot of things. They're talking to the accountant, the credentialing, the onboarding, right? And we hesitate on dividing that role up appropriately because obviously we can't afford it. And what ends up happening is over-the-counter collections start to slip, along with some other metrics. And so depending on the volume in your practice will depend on the appropriate staffing ratios that you need at that front desk. So you either need one full-time person. It could be a full-time person and a virtual assistant so that you can free up that full-time person, right? But having that ratio dialed in and optimized so that you're collecting everything that's owed consistently is really, really key. All right? So that's over-the-counter collections. Number two, units per visit, right? The second major financial touch point is how you are coding your services, how you are coding the delivery of care with your CPT codes and your ICD-10 codes, okay? And so we want to ensure that you are ethically maximizing both the volume and the quality of CPT codes such that you can maximize reimbursement ethically, right? And so, because what gets measured improves, and what gets measured and reported improves exponentially. And so if you don't keep a tight pulse on the way that you're coding your care, it will start to gradually decline, just like everything else in your life. All right. That doesn't mean that patients are bad or clinicians are bad. It's just life. Sometimes we have to have a little bit of accountability to make sure that we're keeping things buttoned up. And honestly, you are paying your clinicians based on some levels of production. And what that means is that they're seeing the appropriate amount of visits every week, and they're also coding for those visits appropriately, so they can at least justify their salary and any additional overhead that comes with employing them. Like, you got to pay for their insurance, you got to pay for the rent and utilities, you got to pay for the admin costs that are associated with their employment. All right. So, again, go back up a few episodes. I can show you how to build a culture of billing and coding performance with your clinical team. But in summary, you want to, as an example, let's say that 80% of your reimbursement comes from insurance. That's a big chunk. Right? And 100% of it, not 100%, but we could just call it 100%, is based on how you code your service, right? So it's important to make sure that you have some type of policies around that, right? And in order to drive great billing in your company, you need to, number one, educate your team, all right? So ensuring that you're educating your team on how to maximally bill, and also how to justify how do you have to deliver care in order and document it to justify that coding, providing them with orientation around what is possible with billing and coding. Okay, so confused people don't. If your providers are just kind of figuring out on their own, they're going to do their own thing. The tool that you have, one of those strongest tools that you have for your people, is to educate them and orient them around what is possible. All right. Number two, you want to create a money value framework, right? Because money is a dirty word. I'm sure that some of you are listening to this video right now and kind of feeling a little cringy, right? Money is a dirty word, but the point is, money is an exchange of value, right? Money is a needed tool to drive our company mission, purpose, and values forward, and to ultimately deliver the most value that we can to our patients and to our team and to the people who own the company, right? We can't ignore the fact that finances is part of it, but it's not why we do it, okay? It's a tool that's used to do what we do. And so creating a framework around how you talk about money in your business will ultimately help to break down that invisible, cringy wall between you and your providers. So have it in the onboarding process, right? We talk about money, we talk about coding, we talk about what an even exchange looks like, right? So having that in place is really important. And then lastly, you want to track it. Like I said, what gets measured improves. So track your units per visit by provider and have them report that to you weekly, so that we can problem solve around what's getting in the way of billing the most that we possibly can and providing that value for our patients. Okay, because ideally you want to lead with value, right? So like, what would have to be true for us to maximize value for our patients? The delivery of value, which would be a lot of hard work. Okay, let's just do that all the time and let's bill it appropriately, right? And then because underbilling is very rampant in the healthcare space, because there's a lot of fear around billing and there's a lot of fear around breaking the rules. And so we're not in the business of breaking rules, but we're not in the business of going broke either, right? So like we need to try to find a happy medium between there, okay? So hopefully that covers that. So you're going to measure that weekly, have it reported, and drive some type of coding efficiency program in the practice. Check out the video that I did on this. All right. Number 3. Third thing, your revenue cycle. Okay. Your revenue cycle. Your denial rate is going to be, hopefully, I don't have to break all that down, but essentially, what percentage of the claims that you bill get denied or don't actually result in a payment? They come back with some type of denial notice from the insurance provider because you didn't cross a T, or you billed too many units, or whatever it is, or you didn't have authorization, or the verification wasn't accurate, right? Which is typically most of the time. We want that number to be low. We want to clean that revenue cycle up so that these claims can go out and get paid on the first pass. And if we don't have good systems in place or processes to ensure that verifications are done accurately, that data is being accurately put into the EMR from the front desk, that any codes that are not approved by that insurance type are being removed from the EMR for that visit, that the authorizations are being tracked accurately and they're within the visit limit and time duration, and we've got approved authorization. Having those systems in place will drive denial rates down so that we can speed up collections, which will ultimately improve our average reimbursement per visit. Okay. And so I kind of spoke to them, but the 2 things that you need to make sure you have in place are, number 1, accurate data entry at the front desk, very accurate insurance verification, extremely accurate authorizations. Okay. So this is a system, right? There's a system that if you follow and you hit those marks, your denial rates will be very manageable. Ideally under 4%. We want them to be under 4%, so that 96 to 98% of your claims are getting paid on the first time. All right. So this would look like weekly audits of all your new patients in the EMR. This would look like a verification process that is auto-reported every day for accuracy. And then number 3, this would be having somebody on your team who owns the authorizations, who has an authorization department, even if it's just a part-time role, somebody has to own it and report it and make sure it's accurate, right? And then number 2, we want timely documentation, timely claim submission for your billing department, okay? If documentation is not done, we can't bill it, all right? And then we want billers that are actually working denials in your practice. All right. Because no matter what you do, there's always going to be a T that it's humans, a lot of human error. All right. So you're going to always have some denials. We just want to make sure that the amount of denials that we do have are manageable and can be managed by a human. And whoever that human is has a process in place to urgently attack and manage those denials, get them resubmitted so that we get paid, so that our AR is cleaned up and tight, and then ultimately helping us drive average reimbursement per visit up. Okay, so see, there's plenty of things you can do, guys. There's plenty of things you can do, right? Those are the 3 things so far. Just a quick recap: over-the-counter collections, skilled units per visit or units per visit, and managing your denial rates. Those are 3 really, really important things. And I call that the profit accelerator system. There's probably one more around setting budgets. But if you do those 3 things and you have systems in place to manage those things routinely every week, What I mean routinely every week, I mean, number one, there's a system in place, meaning it's documented. There's a documented system to effectively perform those tasks. Number two, it is something that is trained to an individual. There's a training process. That training process is built in such a way that they consume the information and they have to display competency on executing on the workflow. Then number three, there are metrics in place that objectify the performance of each of these workflows, and they are reported to somebody who ultimately manages it. Could be you, could be a director of operations or a director of finance. And there's a meeting rhythm, there's an accountability meeting rhythm in place that where those metrics have to be reviewed and analyzed. All right. And then lastly, you have the right person who's got the skills, the temperament, and the desire to want to perform in that role and to actually learn and get better. And if you have those things in place, these metrics will be dialed in, and you'll probably run a practice that outperforms a lot of others. Okay. All right. Moving on to the next thing. Sorry, I'm going kind of fast. Number 4. This is one that a lot of people like to jump to, but you could see these first 3 are very boring. They're very boring. Number 4 gets a little bit more exciting, right? Payer mix and contract management. All right. Some contracts simply don't pay enough. They're not worth being a network with any longer, right? And that's going to change over time depending on, the volume of visits you have in your practice and the systems that you have in place. But at some point, I don't know a practice anywhere in the country that hasn't hit some point where you can no longer just take any contract because you're going to go broke, right? And so what I recommend doing is creating a rhythm where somebody, usually this is going to be somebody who understands the metrics, who's tied to the billing department. Could be your biller, right? Could be a virtual assistant, right? But they have to understand metrics, and just create a simple spreadsheet. Just create a simple spreadsheet. It's you can call it like your master contract spreadsheet or something fancy, right? Doesn't have to be any more sophisticated than that. Okay. And so what you want to look at is your revenue per visit per insurance type. Okay. So if you remember how we calculated average revenue per visit, you just do the same thing. Take that same 90-day window and look at how much money did we collect for that insurance, for Blue Cross or for United or for Cigna, whatever it is. How many visits did we see for that insurance within that time frame? And then you just divide those. And what you'll walk away with is your average revenue per visit per insurance type. Okay? And so I would probably do that at least once a quarter, right? At least once a quarter, you can do that. Then you want to track your cost per visit. This is the simplest metric to measure in the world. It's measured just like revenue per visit. You just do it on the expense side. Okay, so you're going to take, you can take any time frame, look at how many visits did you, look at 90 days, look at a 90-day window, right? And look at how many total, what was your total expenses for those 90 days? Okay, so you want to add up total expenses. It's usually going to be the last line item, the second to last line item on the profit and loss statement. Look at payroll, utilities, everything that came out of the account, and divide that by the total number of visits that you completed in that same time frame. And that's going to show you your average cost per visit. Okay, so essentially, when somebody comes into your practice and you deliver care, what does that cost you? Okay. So you do that. And when you can understand that metric and you can keep it at it has to be low enough to create profits, right? The gap between that number and your reimbursement per visit is where your profits live. And so you're continuously trying to control that gap through the systems that you have and everything that we're talking about today. It's all over this channel, right? Okay, so as an example, let's say your cost per visit is $65 a visit. That's just a random example. I don't know how I came up with it. But let's say you do that, okay? What you would look at, what I would recommend, is dividing that number by 0.9 as a break-even number, okay? What this will give you is, what does my revenue visit need to be at minimum in order to make at least a 10% margin in my practice, okay? And that's going to give you, in this example, $72.22. Okay. Now, what you would also want to do here is you need to factor in denials and inefficiencies. Just call it denials. You need to factor in denials, right? So the lower you make this number, the more buffer you create, right? So you might want to, let's say denials. Maybe a safer number would be 0.8, right? That would give you a 10% margin and a 10% buffer on denials and inefficiencies. So let's say 65 divided by 0.8. That would bring you to a new number of $81.25. Okay, so in this example, you would need to be somewhere between 72.22 and 81.25 in order for it to make mathematical sense for you to even consider being in network with them. Otherwise, you might as well just, when a patient comes in, just give them money and ask them to leave. That's the equivalent of taking a contract that no longer works. All right. So the last thing that you need here, so if you can imagine, you have a spreadsheet, all your contracts are there, you've got your cost per visit, and you're analyzing your cost per visit versus your average reimbursement per visit by payer at least once a quarter, and you're deciding here, which one of these contracts can I get on the phone with and start renegotiating? Right? So you can start some outbound work to that contract manager to say, hey, this isn't enough. Here's my data. I need a little bit more money to make this work, to continue to deliver care, right? Or maybe there's some high payers like workman's comp or attorney liens, or maybe you're recognizing that there are some other insurance contracts that are like very lucrative for you. You can build marketing plans around them, right? And then maybe there's some people that some of these contracts, they just fall below this window, and they can either raise the contract, raise the rate, or you have to have the last thing, which is the courage. You have to have courage to drop truly unprofitable contracts. And that's hard to do. But we will not see insurance change and reform until we as a healthcare profession decide to stop accepting contracts that just no longer work. All right. So if you can imagine, hopefully that system kind of gives you a vision where you could build that cadence to, that's a simple workflow that you can build out. You can assign that to a human. It could be a virtual assistant, and you can have that reported up to you every day. And they can even reach out and do the renegotiation for you. And if you're continuously, it's not about being perfect, but if you're continuously pushing that needle forward in a healthy way, then you can maintain a more favorable average reimbursement per visit over time. All right. All right. Next line item is going to be your cash pay services. Everyone wants to talk about cash pay stuff. All right. Everyone wants to talk about cash pay stuff. You see, this is very far on the list. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do cash, because you should. And I'm not saying you can't do any cash until you get all the other things right. But I would recommend buttoning up these other things really tight so that you can absorb the complexities that come with starting to add cash pay services to your practice, because there are some complexities. You have to learn how to, you have to keep, you got to create a transaction. You got to create a fee schedule. You got to learn how to sell it. You might even have to create a marketing plan around it. Who's going to track it? Or maybe you incentivize your team with it, right? There's a lot of more work, right? And if you start putting too much energy into that, you might forget about the basics, and you're going to see that thing tumble. And that's a mistake that you don't want to make. Don't try to do too many things too soon. But assuming that you've got the basics, the profit accelerator system in place, then you can start focusing on cash pay services. Okay. Here's my criteria. My criteria to do this is, obviously you have to have the basics in place. But number two, you want to start selling services that fit your clinical skills and your brand, right? So you start asking yourself, what are some of the things that fit your clinical skills and brand? Obviously, they're not covered by insurance. A lot of practices that I know are doing things like shockwave therapy. They're doing laser. They're doing wellness zones where they have pneumatic compression devices, and they have stimulation units that do all kinds of crazy things, right? But you could even do like personal training, or you could do fitness consulting. You can do supplements. Okay, so there's a lot of things you can do, and but if you own a pediatric practice, right, then you're not going to probably do a lot of, I would assume you're probably not going to do like a lot of shockwave stuff or fitness programs, right? And so deciding like, what is your niche? Who is your ideal client or ideal patient? And what are some of the services that would fit within that clinical skill set and that niche that you could get really excited about? Okay. That's number one. Number two, you have to genuinely believe that service is going to actually help patients, because you're going to have to sell it. And you're not going to be able to sell what you don't believe in. It just doesn't exist like that. There's a lot of there's emotional energy that comes with sales. And if too much of that energy needs to be artificially created, it's going to be hard to maintain. You want something that's going to excite you, right? And you truly believe in that product, and you believe that it can help people and it can change lives, and you need to have some conviction around that, right? And then lastly, it needs to be sold for cash. It can be sold for cash. If you do those three things, then you can start, you'll start to narrow in on a bucket of services that you can start selling for cash. Okay. And so very clear 4-step process here is, number one, design your offer, right? What is an offer that you feel excited about, that you feel is a real exchange of value for patients? And it could be, your offer can come with, basically the offer is going to be a description. It's going to be your pitch, right? It's going to be the value that you give, and the outcome that you pursue, the way that you charge, the pricing model, that ideally that the patient would be excited about and be willing to give you money for. Okay. So you want to create an offer. Number two, you want to enroll your team into that offer, right? So ideally, your team, your clinicians need to feel excited about it, right? They need to believe in the offer. They need to believe in the service. Like, they want to do great work for patients. So it's important for them to be involved, right? Like if you just say like, hey, this is what we're doing now, this because I say so, it's going to feel very transactional and it's not going to get them excited. So you want to make sure that they feel excited about it as well. All right. And number 3, align incentives. I believe in aligning incentives specifically around cash pay, right? Because your team must be not just intrinsically motivated to sell this product, but they need to be extrinsically motivated. Meaning, if I can sell this product and deliver that value that I believe in, I will be rewarded financially for it. Okay? So there's intrinsic and extrinsic motivation in place. And then you need to create a marketing plan. You got to learn how to knock on doors, maybe run some Google ads, maybe create a landing page, do some email marketing. There's no right or wrong way to do that, but having a strategy to help other people know that you exist and that offer exists at scale is going to be really important for your lead generation. But if you do those things, ideally you can start creating a system of selling cash pay services. Okay. So, as an example, maybe let's say you're at, you remember this guy up here? We're making $50,000 a month, right? Let's say that you're doing, let's say your top line revenue is $50,000 a month. And let's say you're doing 500 visits a month. Okay. That would mean your average reimbursement per visit is $100, $100 a visit. Okay. Now let's say you do something like laser, right? And you say, I'm going to charge, $50 a session on laser. Okay. And then let's say I sell, I'm going to do some simple math on the computer really quick. Let's say I sell 100 sessions. That would be an extra $5,000 a month. Okay. Now let's say we're at, guess what? That's why I have an eraser. Let's say you're at 55,000 a month divided by that 500 visits. No. That's going to be 55,000 divided by 500. $110. Okay? You just grew your revenue per visit by $10 a visit on average, right? That doesn't mean every single person gives you $50 for a laser, but yeah, if you can sell $5,000 a month in laser, that's great, right? It's pure cash. All right. So that's just an example of how you can create impact with your cash pay stuff. Okay. And then lastly, RTM, remote therapeutic monitoring. Medicare has made it a lot easier to get paid for RTM services. And especially at the time of this video, it's easier to do. It's a lot more, there's technology that you can use to automate a lot of the process, but it also is tied to a lot of positive outcomes for patients as well, which is why Medicare wants to pay you for it. So it's just a new skill, and there are third-party vendors who can help you roll it out. If you guys need any support around maybe a connection on some people in my network who can help you with that, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to connect you with people in my network. But remote therapeutic monitoring is just basically a system where you can monitor patient care outside of the treatment room. Okay. So, it's a very simple 3-step process, right? You have to create a process for enrolling patients into your RTM program. Usually that will happen at the front desk. There's an enrollment process. You got to get confirmation. You got to get all those things. Okay. Number 2, you got to create a system of clear ownership, specifically like which clinician is delivering the RTM service and managing that, what admin is doing the enrolling, right? So that they can, which team there is running the RTM service and actually reporting that to you, right? And then lastly, you need to have a billing department that knows how to bill for that service and get paid for it. All right. There's a little bit of a revenue cycle because this does go through insurance, right? So there's a revenue cycle curveball that you have to kind of work through and learn those ropes. Okay. I don't have enough time or knowledge to go through all that in detail, but the point is, if you execute on this, it could actually make a big difference in your practice. All right. So those are your 6 steps, guys. And my recommendation is start at the top and dial in each of those. And then you know what? You're going to dial them all in, and then a year's going to go by and you're going to slip on a few, and you're going to have to go back and dial it in a little bit more, right? But keeping tight metrics around them will help you a lot. All right. Here's the thing. You don't have to be, your job as the owner is not to do every single eval and to look at every single claim, right? Manage every single denial or memorize every code for every claim all the time. That's a lot of work. You don't have to do all that. But your job is to know what your real average reimbursement per visit is, and also understand and teach your team on which levers that you can use, the over-the-counter collections, the way that you bill and code, denials, payer mix, cash pay, and RTM, what those levers are. Put the right people in the systems in place who are in charge of those levers, right? So who owns the metric? So create an accountability rhythm. Who owns the metric? How often do you meet with them to review that metric? And what decisions do you make from those numbers? Right? And if you can execute that and teach your team how to do that, you can create a team that can help you win around the numbers. Okay? But in order to do that, there's a lot of learning that needs to take place, and there's a lot of cognitive load that will be required from you to execute on that stuff because it's hard. So you're going to need protected time away from the treatment floor in order to focus on building these systems in place. And you have to find the courage to stop living in the fight or flight world all the time, right? And learn how to start running your practice as an architect, as a designer, and not somebody that just has to put out fires all day long. All right. So if you've been guessing at your average reimbursement per visit, if you've watched this video and you thought to yourself, this guy might be talking to me, right? If you're doing any of that stuff, you're not alone. I fall into that trap all the time. We're trying to do this together. It's not about being perfect. All right. But until you do confront that number and build these systems in place, you're going to continue. You're not going to get the best return that you can from your practice. You're going to have more stress in your business. You're going to have to deploy more emotional energy to hold things together. And you're just not going to have a model that supports you or your team. And if you want help with that, as always, you can check out the show notes below or wherever you're watching this. Book a call with our team. I'm happy to go through how we've done this in our practice, how we've helped other practices do this. We can go through what you might need. Maybe it's just to tighten up of your system. Maybe it's maybe you need better staffing, right? Maybe there's ways to carve out margin or implement some systems with virtual assistants, maybe, or maybe you need better clinicians on your team to help you actually drive performance in your practice. All right. So if any of that sounds helpful, you can click the link in the show notes, book a call. Happy to support you, but that's not a requirement. If it doesn't make sense, keep watching the videos, but don't just watch and sit around, because watching solves nothing. Thinking solves not a lot either. The doingness is what solves the problems. So I need you to take one or two things from this video and go and take action, massive action. And let me know if you have any questions. I'm cheering for you. I'll see you in the next one. God bless.